Cancer, welcome back, beautiful souls. I hope you're doing well wherever you are. Before we get started, thank you for being here. Thank you for your support, your kindness, and for spending a little bit of your time with me today. All right, Cancer, as I was sitting with your energy, I kept feeling the same thing over and over again. Someone has been trying very hard not to feel something. They've been distracting themselves, keeping busy, telling themselves they're fine. But honestly, their heart keeps finding its way back to you. And I don't think they expected that. I don't think they expected your presence to stay with them the way it has. Because no matter how much time passes, no matter how much distance exists between the two of you, something keeps pulling their thoughts right back in your direction. Okay, let's see what the cards want to reveal. The first thing I notice is this incredibly soft energy surrounding you. It's interesting because sometimes the strongest connections don't announce themselves loudly. They don't arrive with chaos. They don't need to demand attention. They simply stay. And that's exactly what I feel happening here. Someone keeps returning to the memory of you. Not necessarily to a specific conversation, not necessarily to a specific moment, just you, your energy, your presence, the way you made them feel when life felt overwhelming, the way things seemed quieter around you, safer around you. I have to be honest, Cancer. This person may not fully understand why they keep thinking about you. They've tried to explain it away. They've tried to focus on other things. Work, responsibilities, daily life, maybe even other people. But every time they think they've moved forward, something brings them back. And as I look at the star sitting beside the Queen of Cups, it almost feels like this person finds comfort in the thought of you without even realizing it. You know how certain songs immediately bring someone to mind? Or how a familiar scent can suddenly transport you years into the past? That's what your energy feels like to this person. It lingers, it stays. It follows them into quiet moments when nobody else is around. There is something very private about this. I don't feel like they're openly talking about these emotions. In fact, I think many people around them would be surprised if they knew how often Cancer crosses this person's mind. Because on the outside, they may appear calm, they may appear unaffected. But underneath that surface, there is an entirely different story unfolding. I keep seeing someone sitting alone for a moment longer than usual, their phone in their hand, their thoughts drifting somewhere they didn't intend them to go, and somehow they end up thinking about you again. The Six of Cups keeps drawing my attention here, not because this person is stuck in the past. It feels deeper than that. It feels like they're trying to reconnect with a feeling they haven't been able to find anywhere else. And that feeling somehow has your name attached to it. When they think about you, there is a softness that enters their energy. The tension eases. The walls lower. The pressure they normally carry seems lighter. It's almost as if part of them associates you with emotional safety. And that's rare, especially for someone who has spent a long time protecting themselves. The Queen of Cups feels so present here, not as a card, not as a symbol, but as an energy. The way you listen, the way you care, the way you seem to understand things that other people miss. This person remembers that, more than you realize. I keep hearing the words, "They understood me." And maybe they never said that out loud. Maybe they never even admitted it to themselves. But it's coming through very strongly. They felt seen by you, not judged, not analyzed, seen. And once somebody experiences that kind of connection, it becomes very difficult to forget. Especially when life becomes complicated. Especially when everything around them feels uncertain. Because then they start comparing. Not intentionally. It just happens. They meet people. They have conversations. They go through experiences. And somewhere in the back of their mind, they're measuring those moments against what they felt with you. And somehow nothing feels exactly the same. The Empress appears here with such quiet confidence. I don't feel this person looking at you as someone they need to chase. I feel them looking at you as someone they deeply admire. Someone whose value became clearer with time. It's almost like they keep discovering new reasons to appreciate you long after the moment has passed. That's what surprises them. Usually feelings fade. Usually memories become distant. Usually people move on. Yet every time they think they've reached that point, something happens. A reminder, a memory, a dream, a feeling they can't quite explain, and suddenly you're there again. Not physically, but emotionally, energetically, still occupying a space inside their heart. Okay, there's something else happening here. Because the more this person thinks about you, the more they begin questioning themselves. Why are these feelings still here? Why haven't they disappeared? Why does Cancer still matter this much? And honestly, I don't think they have an answer yet. I think they're still trying to understand it themselves. But what I do see is that these thoughts are becoming harder to ignore. These emotions are becoming harder to dismiss. And as the star continues to sit beside the Six of Cups, I can't help but feel that something inside this person is slowly awakening to a truth they've been avoiding for a very long time. A truth that may become impossible to push aside as we move deeper into this story. There's something else surfacing here, Cancer, and honestly, I think this is where things become much harder for this person to ignore. Because what I'm seeing isn't just longing anymore. It's resistance. The kind of resistance that comes from someone who has spent a very long time trying to stay in control of their emotions. The moon is sitting here now, and the atmosphere changes immediately. Everything feels quieter, heavier, more private. It's like stepping into a room where nobody is speaking, yet there are 1,000 unspoken things hanging in the air. This person has been carrying emotions they don't fully know what to do with. And for a long time, they convinced themselves that silence was the safest option. Not because they didn't care, not because they didn't feel, but because feeling this deeply scared them. You know, sometimes people believe they are protecting themselves when they're actually protecting their fears. And that's exactly what this energy feels like. I keep seeing someone standing in front of a closed door, not because they're locked out, because they're afraid of what's on the other side if they open it. What if these feelings are real? What if Cancer means more than they wanted to admit? What if letting themselves care changes everything? That's where their mind keeps going. The strange thing is that avoiding those questions hasn't brought them peace. If anything, it's created even more noise inside of them. The Four of Cups keeps pulling my attention here. And what I notice is this person trying very hard to convince themselves they should focus elsewhere. Focus on work, focus on responsibilities, focus on practical things. Anything except what their heart keeps trying to bring back into view. But their emotions are stubborn. Every time they try to push them down, they seem to return in a different form. A memory, a feeling, a dream. A random moment during the day when Cancer suddenly crosses their mind. And I don't think they like how vulnerable that makes them feel. Because vulnerability isn't something they've been comfortable with. This person feels like someone who learned a long time ago that emotions can be dangerous. Maybe not because love failed them. Maybe because trusting people did. Maybe because opening up once came with disappointment, or rejection, or heartbreak. Whatever happened, I feel like it taught them to keep certain walls in place, to stay guarded, to remain composed, to never let anyone see how much they truly care. But here's the problem. Cancer somehow slipped past those defenses. Not by force, not by chasing, not by demanding anything. Your energy simply reached places inside this person that most people never get access to. And that's what unsettles them. Because once somebody reaches your heart, maintaining those walls becomes exhausting. I have to say, the Five of Wands feels very internal here. I don't actually see this person fighting with you. I see them fighting with themselves. Part of them wants to keep everything hidden. Part of them wants to keep pretending everything is fine. Part of them wants to maintain the image they've carefully built. But another part is getting tired. Tired of carrying everything alone. Tired of pretending they don't miss you. Tired of acting like this connection doesn't matter. And honestly, Cancer, I think that's why their energy feels so restless. They're exhausted from holding back. Imagine trying to keep water behind a dam that's already beginning to crack. Eventually, the pressure becomes too much. And that's what this feels like. The emotions aren't disappearing. They're building. Quietly, consistently, day after day. The moon keeps showing me hidden feelings. The Four of Cups keeps showing me avoidance. The Five of Wands keeps showing me inner conflict. And sitting beside all of that, I see strength. Not the kind of strength people usually talk about. Not force, not control, not dominance. A different kind. The kind that asks someone to be honest with themselves. The kind that requires courage instead of resistance. Because honestly, it's easier to run from feelings than it is to face them. It's easier to stay silent than risk vulnerability. It's easier to build walls than explain why they exist. And I think this person is beginning to realize that. They're beginning to understand that the strongest thing they could possibly do isn't continue hiding. It's acknowledging what's already there. You know what keeps standing out to me? The sadness underneath all of this. Not dramatic sadness, not chaotic sadness, just a quiet emptiness. The kind that shows up when somebody knows something important is missing from their life. And no matter how busy they stay, no matter how distracted they become, that absence never fully goes away. Cancer, this person may have spent months convincing themselves they could outgrow these feelings, outweight these feelings, outthink these feelings. Yet here they are, still carrying them, still wondering about you, still feeling your energy when they least expect it. And I think that's becoming impossible for them to dismiss. Because every wall they built was designed to keep emotions contained. But emotions don't always follow rules, especially when they're real. especially when they're tied to someone who made them feel understood in ways they weren't prepared for. Okay, there's something shifting here, not externally, internally. A realization that avoiding feelings and healing feelings are two very different things. And I don't think this person fully sees where that realization is leading yet. But I can feel it beginning, like the first crack of light appearing through a room that has been dark for a very long time. And what starts emerging from that light may force them to confront something they've been trying very hard not to see. A memory keeps surfacing here, and what stands out is that it doesn't seem to arrive when this person is expecting it. They're not sitting around trying to revisit the past. They're not actively searching for reminders. Life is simply happening around them, and suddenly something pulls them backward for a moment. A familiar song, a certain expression someone uses, a place they haven't thought about in months, and somehow it always circles back to Cancer. The Six of Cups appears again, but this time the energy feels different, less nostalgic, more revealing. Because what this person is beginning to see isn't just the memory itself, it's the impact you left behind. For a long time, they focused on circumstances. What happened? What didn't happen? What could have gone differently? But lately, their attention keeps moving somewhere deeper, toward what your presence actually meant in their life. And honestly, I don't think they fully appreciated it at the time. You know how sometimes people don't realize the value of something until they're no longer standing inside it? That's the feeling I'm getting. Because the Hermit is showing me someone who has been spending a lot of time inside their own thoughts, not because they want answers from other people, because they're finally asking questions they avoided before. Questions that don't disappear just because they're inconvenient. Questions that keep returning until they're acknowledged. And one of those questions seems to be, why did Cancer affect me the way they did? Not why they were attracted, not why they were interested. Something much deeper than that. Why did this connection stay with them? Why did it leave such a permanent mark? Why does it still feel important after all this time? I have to say, there's a surprising amount of humility entering this person's energy. Because I don't feel them blaming circumstances anymore. I don't feel them focusing on everyone else's role in the story. The spotlight keeps turning inward, and that's where judgment becomes impossible to ignore. It's almost like this person is standing face to face with their own truth. Not the version they've been telling themselves. Not the version that's easiest to live with. The real one. And the real one is asking them to be honest. Honest about their feelings. Honest about their choices. Honest about what they've been pretending not to know. There is a moment I keep seeing. Not a specific memory. More like an emotional realization. The kind that happens when somebody suddenly connects dots they've been staring at for years. Everything becomes clear for a second. Painfully clear. And once that clarity arrives, it becomes very difficult to return to old explanations. Because old explanations stop making sense. The Ace of Swords enters the reading exactly there. Like a flash of understanding cutting through a room that has been filled with uncertainty. And I think this realization catches them off guard. Because what they're discovering isn't necessarily about romance, it's about significance. Cancer became significant. More significant than they allowed themselves to acknowledge. There were lessons they learned because of you. Ways they changed because of you. Perspectives they carry because of conversations they had with you. I keep getting the feeling that this person still hears certain things you've said, maybe not word for word. But the essence remains, something you told them, something you encouraged them to see, something you challenged them to understand. It's still there, still influencing them, still shaping the way they move through life. And that's when the regret starts appearing. Not dramatic regret, not self-pity, a quieter kind. The kind that emerges when somebody realizes they were standing in front of something meaningful and didn't fully recognize it. Because the truth is, Cancer, this person thought there would always be more time, more opportunities, more chances to figure things out later. But life has a way of reminding people that later isn't always guaranteed. And once that awareness settles in, the emotional weight becomes harder to carry. The Hermit keeps drawing me back. I see someone revisiting old conversations in their mind, replaying moments, looking at situations from a completely different angle than they did before. And what's fascinating is that their perspective keeps changing. Things they once dismissed suddenly seem important. Things they once overlooked suddenly feel meaningful. Even certain misunderstandings are being viewed differently now. It's almost like they're discovering another layer of the story every time they look back. And every layer brings them closer to something they can no longer deny, that this connection mattered. More than they admitted. More than they expected. More than they were comfortable accepting. Honestly, I think that's what has been unsettling them the most. not the feelings themselves. The realization that those feelings never actually disappeared. They simply went underground. And while they were busy convincing themselves they had moved on, something inside them continued carrying this connection forward. The Six of Cups feels almost haunting here, not in a negative way, in the way certain beautiful memories refuse to fade. The kind that quietly follow you through different chapters of life. The kind that remain alive because they were genuine. And I feel like this person is beginning to understand that. They're beginning to understand why your memory never fully left, why your influence never fully faded, why every road somehow keeps leading them back to the same unanswered questions. Okay, there's another realization forming here, a bigger one, because recognizing what they've lost is one thing. Understanding what that loss has truly cost them is something else entirely. And as these cards continue unfolding, I can't help but feel that this person is getting closer to a truth that may change the way they see not only Cancer, but themselves as well. An image keeps appearing in my mind as I sit with this energy. It feels like somebody standing in the middle of a room filled with things they no longer need. Old habits, old fears, old stories they've been carrying for years. And for the first time, instead of holding on to everything, they're beginning to ask themselves a different question. What still belongs in my life? That's where the Eight of Cups immediately pulls me, because this doesn't feel like running away. It feels like somebody becoming honest enough to admit that certain things are no longer helping them grow. And honestly, Cancer, I think this realization has been uncomfortable, because letting go sounds simple when people talk about it. Living it is something completely different, especially when those attachments have become familiar, especially when they've existed for so long that they almost feel like part of your identity. This person has been carrying emotional weight that didn't start with you. I want to make that very clear. Some of the heaviness I'm picking up existed long before your paths crossed. Old disappointments, old betrayals, old wounds they learned to survive instead of heal. And I think for years they convinced themselves that surviving was enough. But something has changed. The version of this person I'm seeing now feels tired, not physically, spiritually, emotionally. Tired of repeating the same cycles. Tired of ending up in the same emotional place. Tired of watching fear make decisions on their behalf. And that's where death enters this reading. Not loudly, not dramatically. It arrives like a quiet understanding. Like somebody looking in the mirror and realizing they cannot continue being who they've been. You know, sometimes people reach a point where change stops being a choice and starts becoming a necessity. That's the energy surrounding them. Because the old version of themselves is becoming difficult to maintain. The masks are heavier, the excuses sound weaker. The distractions aren't working the way they used to. And underneath all of it, there's this growing desire for something more authentic, something real, something emotionally healthy. I have to say, this person has been confronting parts of themselves they usually avoid. The uncomfortable parts, the parts that don't look good, the parts that are easier to blame on circumstances than to actually address. But they're looking anyway, and that's significant. Because healing doesn't begin when everything feels better. Healing begins when somebody finally stops looking away. The Five of Pentacles feels deeply personal here. I don't just see financial concerns. I don't just see external struggles. I see someone realizing how isolated they've become, how disconnected they've felt from their own heart. There is a loneliness surrounding this energy, not because people aren't around them, because they haven't allowed themselves to be fully seen. They've spent so much time protecting themselves that somewhere along the way they lost touch with what genuine emotional connection feels like. And Cancer, that's one of the reasons your energy keeps standing out. Because whether they intended it or not, you reminded them of something important. You reminded them that vulnerability isn't weakness. You reminded them that closeness doesn't always lead to pain. You reminded them that being understood can actually feel safe. The strange thing is that they're only fully realizing this now, while looking back, while reflecting, while trying to understand why certain connections faded and why yours never completely left their heart. There's also a cleansing process happening around them. And I don't necessarily mean physically, although for some people that could be true as well. This feels more like emotional housekeeping. They're beginning to recognize which relationships drain them, which environments keep them stuck, which patterns continue creating unnecessary suffering. And little by little, they're creating distance from those things. Not because they're angry, not because they're trying to punish anyone, because they're finally understanding that peace requires different choices. The Eight of Cups keeps showing me movement, not rushed movement, intentional movement. The kind that happens when someone finally accepts they deserve better than the version of life they've been settling for. And that's where the Nine of Cups begins to appear on the horizon. Not as a destination they've reached. More like a possibility they're finally allowing themselves to imagine. A life that feels lighter, healthier, more aligned with who they truly are. And what fascinates me is that Cancer keeps appearing somewhere inside that vision. Not necessarily because they're planning every detail. Not because they're forcing an outcome. But because when they imagine emotional fulfillment, your energy somehow finds its way into the picture. Your warmth, your understanding, the comfort they associate with you, it remains present, even while they're trying to rebuild themselves, even while they're learning difficult lessons, even while they're releasing things they should have released years ago. And honestly, I think that's surprising them, because they expected clarity to pull them away from old feelings. Instead, clarity seems to be helping them understand those feelings better. There is a maturity developing here, a willingness to take responsibility, a willingness to acknowledge where they've fallen short, and perhaps most importantly, a willingness to stop treating emotional growth as something they can postpone indefinitely. Because life has been teaching them, quietly, consistently, sometimes gently, sometimes not so gently, and those lessons are beginning to accumulate. Death continues standing beside the Eight of Cups, almost like a silent invitation. Leave behind what no longer serves you. Trust what you're becoming. Allow the old chapter to close. And as this person moves through that process, I can't help but feel they're preparing themselves for something bigger than they currently realize. Not because everything is suddenly figured out. Far from it. There are still questions here, still uncertainties, still emotions they haven't fully expressed. But the version of them that was hiding behind old wounds is slowly losing its grip. And the version that's emerging seems far more willing to face what comes next. Because what begins forming in the distance feels less like an ending, and more like the first glimpse of a conversation that has been waiting to happen for a very long time. A shift is happening here, Cancer, and it feels different from everything we've been looking at so far. Less about what this person is leaving behind, more about what they're finally ready to face. Because there comes a moment when someone can no longer hide behind distance, no longer hide behind distractions, no longer hide behind the excuse that they need more time. And I think this person is approaching that moment. The energy feels quieter than before, but also much clearer, almost like fog slowly lifting from a landscape that has been hidden for a very long time. The Lovers appears here, and immediately I notice something changing in this person's heart. Not because they suddenly have all the answers, not because every fear has disappeared, because they're becoming more honest, and honesty changes everything. You know, for a long time, this person seemed focused on managing their emotions, containing them, controlling them, keeping them in neat little boxes where they wouldn't disrupt the rest of their life. But emotions rarely stay where we put them. Eventually, they find a way to speak, and that's exactly what feels like it's happening now. There are words they've carried for a very long time, words they rehearsed in their mind, words they almost said, words they stopped themselves from saying again and again. And I keep getting the feeling that the weight of those unspoken emotions has become heavier than the fear of expressing them. That's important. Because when somebody reaches that point, something inside them begins to move. The King of Cups feels incredibly present. Not loud, not impulsive, not dramatic, just steady. Like someone sitting quietly with their emotions instead of running from them. And honestly, Cancer, I think that's one of the biggest changes taking place here. This person isn't trying to escape what they feel anymore. They're trying to understand it. They're trying to hold it. They're trying to figure out what to do with it. And every answer seems to point back toward the same place, back toward you. I have to say, there's a softness entering their energy that wasn't there before. The defensiveness feels weaker. The walls feel lower. The need to always protect themselves feels less urgent. Because they're beginning to recognize that vulnerability isn't the enemy. The real enemy has been avoidance, the silence, the distance, the constant postponing of conversations that needed to happen. And somewhere deep down, they know that. The Ace of Pentacles appears almost like a doorway. Not a guarantee, not a promise, just an opportunity. A chance to approach things differently than before. A chance to build something on honesty instead of confusion. A chance to speak instead of assume. A chance to show up instead of disappear. And what fascinates me is that this person seems increasingly aware of that opportunity. It's no longer something they're overlooking. It's becoming difficult to ignore, because every lesson they've been learning keeps leading them toward the same realization. You can't create something meaningful while hiding from the truth. You can't experience closeness while keeping your heart locked away. You can't expect peace while carrying words that were never spoken. There's a scene I'm seeing very clearly. Someone sitting alone late in the evening. No distractions, no noise, no responsibilities demanding their attention. Just silence. And inside that silence, Cancer appears. Not as a memory this time, not as a regret, as a possibility, as someone they genuinely want to move toward. And that realization feels significant because it's different from longing, different from nostalgia, different from wishing things had gone another way. This feels intentional. This feels conscious. This feels like somebody slowly deciding they don't want to keep standing still. The Fool enters the reading here, and immediately I feel movement. Not reckless movement, not impulsive action. More like someone standing at the edge of a new chapter, realizing they cannot stay where they've been forever. And honestly, I think they're surprising themselves. Because if you had asked this person months ago whether they'd reached this point, they probably would have said no. They probably would have found a reason to delay, a reason to wait, a reason to stay hidden. But something has changed. Life has changed them. Reflection has changed them. Growth has changed them. And now they're looking at things through very different eyes. The Six of Swords feels almost peaceful compared to everything we've seen before. The emotional storms aren't controlling them the way they once did. The confusion is losing its grip. The inner battles are beginning to settle, not completely, but enough for them to finally hear what their heart has been trying to tell them all along. And what I keep hearing is surprisingly simple. Not grand, not complicated, just simple. I miss Cancer. I still care. I wish I had said more. I wish I had been honest. Those feelings keep surfacing, again and again. And every time they do, they seem harder to dismiss. Okay, there's something beautiful about this energy. Not because everything is perfect. Not because every obstacle has disappeared. Because authenticity is beginning to replace fear. And whenever that happens, possibilities start appearing where walls once stood. This person seems increasingly aware that there are conversations they've postponed for too long. Feelings they've hidden for too long. Truths they've avoided for too long. And the closer they get to acknowledging those truths, the more the path ahead begins to clear. What once felt impossible starts feeling imaginable. What once felt frightening starts feeling necessary. And as I sit with these cards, I can't shake the feeling that something important is approaching. Not because destiny is forcing it. Not because the universe is demanding it. Because a heart that has spent so long hiding is finally beginning to understand that some feelings were never meant to stay hidden forever. Cancer, there's a feeling that this story isn't quite finished yet. It feels like something has been slowly unfolding beneath the surface for a long time, and only recently has the truth begun finding its way into the light. Whatever happens from here, I hope you continue choosing your peace, your healing, and the things that genuinely bring warmth to your heart. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Thank you for your support, your kindness, and your beautiful energy. It truly means more than you know. Take care of yourself, Cancer, and I'll be seeing you again very soon in the next reading. Bye for now.